Welcome to Dot Social, the first podcast to explore the world of decentralized social media. Each episode, host Mike McHugh talks to a leader in this movement, someone who sees the Fediverse's tremendous potential and understands that this could be the internet's next wave. Today, Mike's talking to two key leaders at Threads, Rachel Lambert, Director of Product Management, and Peter Cottle, Software Engineer. Both are longtime Meta employees who've expressed a genuine care for open source software and communities, as well as trust and safety. In fact, Rachel launched the Oversight Board, which helps Meta be accountable for trust and safety decisions across its social apps. We hope you enjoy this conversation.
Rachel, Peter, welcome to Dot Social.
Thank you.
Excited to be here.
It is so exciting to talk to you guys. Congratulations on not just the launch of Threads, but of the beginning of the work you guys have done to federate.
Yeah, it's been a long journey, but our first milestone's out, so super exciting.
I can't wait. We're going to get into that. And I'm really excited to talk a little bit about, how it's going, where it's going. But before we get into that, I think the thing that people really want to understand is, why are you doing this?
Yeah, it's a really good question. We've been talking about it since before Threads launched as, hey, this is an app that we want to see integrated with the Fediverse. And I think there's two key reasons why this is important for us. First, it's just really spiritually aligned with what Threads is trying to do overall. We're trying to be the best place for people to have relevant public conversations, be able to have a lot of those conversations even in more real time. And that means really being able to help people find the audiences that are best for those conversations. And we think that there's opportunity for people to find audiences that they won't find on Threads in other places, like in the Fediverse. And that will only continue to grow as an opportunity as the Fediverse grows. And then I would say the second thing is, Threads is still a really new app. We launched 9 months ago. We're still doing a lot of basic feature development and making sure that people are having a really great experience on the app. So we're still looking for what are those killer features that are going to help us differentiate. And we think Fediverse is a really compelling way for especially creators to be able to own their audiences in ways that they aren't able to own on other apps today. So we think that there's really exciting opportunity here. We know Fediverse is still in the early stages, but in starting to enter into its golden years, really. So
yeah,
I need to be in it early.
Yeah, and if I would just add also, I think it matches Meta as a company, our investment in open source and open protocols. And so I think, if you look at it in isolation, it actually matches a lot what we're doing with PyTorch and Llama. So it's just kind of cool from the engineering side that we're coming back to open source, but now in an open protocol with this product.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you guys have certainly contributed a lot of open source over the years and continue to do so. We're looking at React Native right now as
nice.
A great, fantastic contribution on that front. So yeah. When you were thinking about creating Threads, was the Fediverse something that was a part of that thinking? In other words, how foundational is the Fediverse for Threads versus how much of it is a feature for Threads?
I would say very foundational. This actually predates my participation in Threads on the team, but the team was talking about this really since very, very early stages. And that was part of a lot of the team's thinking and how is this actually going to get integrated into the app's experience overall. And, part of this has just been about how do we think about opening this set of features and functionality up for people in a responsible way? Because working within the Fediverse is a really different way of experiencing the app. It's a really different set of expectations around how to share content and what that's going to look like and what that means for, you delete it on Threads, what happens in the Fediverse. It's just a lot of new things to introduce people to. And that's been where we're spending our time is both figuring out how do we introduce this in a way to users that they can understand and make this feel like something that they can opt into and really learn and be able to control that part of their experience. And also setting the right expectations for what happens when you are a federated user.
One of actually the earliest documents I prepped for leads when we were thinking about Threads was ActivityPub, a one-pager primer on how it works and what value it can add, and like, is there existing product market fit for it? And so it's been foundational since like the very early days of us building threads, at least on the engineering side. And that's why it was in the opt-in flow, or like kind of like the onboarding steps at launch. And
I remember.
We wanted to maybe be like a little more integrated when we first launched, but there's a lot of things to do to get the app out the door. But now we're like really excited where we are now. So
you guys have obviously looked at Blue Sky and what they're doing with App Protocol and so on. Was App Protocol or other federation protocols ever in the consideration, or was it, was it clear to you that ActivityPub was the right way to go for what you want to do?
I think early on, we kind of just looked at ActivityPub because it's from a standards organization and from the W3C.
Yeah.
And it's also kind of been battle tested. So it's like 10 years old, which you could say is like nice because it's had development and people have kind of like built products on it. So it's kind of been ActivityPub from the beginning. I do think Blue Sky has some interesting things going on with data portability within the app protocol. Kind of excited to see if that could be like ported over to ActivityPub in some kind of way.
Yeah.
But I just think from the standards organization standpoint, it made sense to go with ActivityPub.
Yeah.
It's also where, most of the users are today. Like Blue Sky wasn't even available at the time when we were thinking about being able to do this federation work.
Right.
To provide user value right out the door, then we also want to be able to see like where are the audiences that people can build.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds like it was very foundational, this concept of federation, that you would be helping to build a larger social web through the launch of Threads. Mm-hmm. That's bigger than Threads itself, right? And Threads as a key participant in that. Is that a fair characterization?
Yeah.
Yeah, nailed it.
That's incredibly exciting to hear. As somebody who, worked on the web in the early days, I know that it's incredibly important to have large players adopt that, right? Microsoft adopted the web when I was at Netscape. And it was a competitive challenge for Netscape, but it was good for the overall web at the end of the day. It made the web really an incredibly sort of standard model for how you would be online. And, hopefully there'll be other large businesses that will adopt ActivityPub as well, the way you guys have. So that is, I think you guys having done that has been a very positive step forward for the concept of a broader open social web.
Yeah, I agree. But I would also give you credit, for Flipboard. I think like that's another kind of like household name that is joining the Fediverse. And I think the more like it becomes a thing that is associated with the products you already use, I think like the more and more it becomes like, hey, like actually there's a bunch of value I see just because I'm using a bunch of these apps already.
It's been exciting because people just have more choice to use whatever apps or services they want. People get to go where the rules are that align the most with their values overall, and whatever standards are being upheld in these servers or instances, they get to, basically vote with their feet in terms of where do they actually want to be spending their time. So we think that's really exciting. It's also really exciting just from like a product development standpoint, when you're able to reduce the cost of like how to actually build up your graph, you can spend a lot more time in building really cool features and functionality. So that's been really cool to see from, even players like Blue Sky, like what they're doing with their feeds and discoverability. It's okay. Right. Yeah, that's actually really interesting to see how you guys are approaching some of these product experience questions. And that's where you can devote more of your time overall when you're building something. So we think that's a really cool innovation story for Fediverse too.
This has, I think, been a really important step. How has the reaction been to, from users, from creators, from the Fediverse that you guys have seen from your perspective?
I think people are excited to see that, we're doing what we said we would do a long time ago. And we said we were going to federate. And we said, we wanted to do this responsibly and methodically and make sure we were getting the right input from folks. But people are actually seeing that come alive. So I think there's definitely some initial excitement there. I think we've been pretty pleased to see like what adoption numbers have looked like yet, even though we're not really at a point where we're trying to actively promote it to people. We're kind of like treating this as a for people who really want to opt in, it's obviously there, and we're starting to do that gradual rollout overall. But we think that we've still got some things to work through in terms of how we describe this to people. What are like really the key things that matter for people to understand about the pros, as well as some of like the trade-offs when you federate overall in terms of like what that means for your content generally. But I think, reception overall has been relatively positive, and we just feel like we've got a much longer way to go on this journey. It's been a long journey so far. We're really excited to have like our first user-facing milestone out, but definitely a ton more that we need to do to develop the functionality and make sure that people really understand the value of it.
Yeah, and say on the engineering side, it's been cool to see the mostly positive reception. I feel like people, there's nothing like having the API actually working and JSON actually going across the wire to kind of go from skepticism to be like, wow, this is actually happening. And I can see threads posts in my Mastodon client or in my, like Firefish client, and how much value that adds out of the box. And so, and one of the kind of like cute things I've seen is people go on threads and kind of like reply to creators and be like, hey, can you turn on Fediverse? I want to follow you like over my other client. And then creators being like, oh yeah, sure. It's like just an easy button to click. And it's so much easier than maybe like having multiple accounts and signing up for different clients and cross posting between all these different places. So it's been cool to see like the kind of flywheel of, hey, I want to follow you over here. And the creators turn it on, they get a good experience. So I've been, I don't know, definitely super positive, and I've been glad to see the positive reception.
Yeah, I think that the ability to follow key people who are on threads and see the posts that they're making there in Mastodon, in any kind of Mastodon experience, whether you're using the Mastodon native app or Ivory or inside of Flipboard or any other app like that, is really pretty cool. I mean, it really feels like a big moment. To actually see it working. You can talk about it, theorize, but when you actually see it working, it's awesome. It's really cool to see. So can you tell, who are some of the folks that have federated that you guys are excited about?
I mean, Evan P., one of the co-authors of ActivityPub, has federated. Of course he did. So that's great. Masseri has, Mark Zuckerberg, the CEO of Meta has. And so, I think we've seen, I've even seen a bunch just in my graph of people turn it on. Is
there like a list of like cool people who've federated that you should start following now?
We're not necessarily maintaining a list, but there are lists out there already on the Fediverse of people kind of creating lists of like, hey, here are the top threads accounts you might want to follow. And that's kind of like part of the innovation you get once you use an open protocol, is that somebody can look at their server and be like, oh, wow, like these are the accounts from threads that are trending on my server, and kind of like put up an experience to go see those accounts. So that's one of the nice things that like once we've turned this on, then the community can kind of like create their own products around it.
You can also go to somebody's profile and see if they're federated. So we kept that threads.net pill on people's profiles for when they have actually opted into being federated. But yeah, like Peter said, we're probably not going to maintain a list of everybody.
So when you, so now you've got this piece done, I know you guys laid out a roadmap kind of for roughly a year or so. What do you see as the next step?
So we do have a few milestone approaches overall, and I think we've been pretty open about some of these. The first step was really just allowing people to be able to publish out to the Fediverse and get some feedback on their Fediverse content through the form of aggregated likes on threads. Our second milestone is really going to be about helping you see the fullness of that conversation on Fediverse and being able to do that from threads too. So starting to get a little bit more bi-directional in content and engagement that's being shared. So people will be able to start seeing replies on their Fediverse posts on the Threads app. And then the milestone after that is really starting to lay the tracks for, okay, now you can actually follow Fediverse users from the Threads app, and you can also see Fediverse content on the Threads app too, and figuring out how that interweaves with posts and content that people are publishing just directly from the Threads app. That's how we've been kind of thinking about the sequencing. Actually, it kind of looks like Flipboard was taking a maybe somewhat similar approach, not exactly those same lines, but
no, it's a similar set of steps. I think that from a technology point of view, there's a lot to implement, right? And then there's a lot to do from a user experience point of view, so you don't confuse people. So it's a similar set of steps, but it sounds as though, when things are kind of complete, or I guess they're never really complete, but when you're looking to get to this point where people who are on threads can follow people in the Fediverse, and people in the Fediverse can follow and interact and engage with people who are on threads. That's really the end state you're striving to.
Yeah, that's definitely the North Star. And I'd even add that, like, in an ideal world, eventually kind of in your home feed, you see threads content and Fediverse content, it's sitting right next to each other.
Right.
And kind of like, it's just a consumption experience. And it's like you don't have the mental model of like what's outside threads and what's inside threads. It's just all just good content from people you follow, regardless of the platform. So something like a further North Star, but I think that's like definitely worth it.
Yeah, that's exciting. So now there are folks who do have some concerns or fears about Federation in general and Federation as it relates to threads and meta more broadly. So I'm sure, I know you guys have heard this feedback. You've also, I think, done a really fantastic job at reaching out and talking to people and listening. I love the fact that you were at Fediforum. It's a very kind of grassroots, small, crew of people who very much care about the Fediverse. And, I think there was some fantastic conversation. People were fairly vocal about both their support and their concerns. And I think you guys did a great job listening. What do you, what are some of the, I guess one of the concerns that people have is that you could just decide, we're not going to do this. We're going to rug pull, as they say. This seems very foundational, though, so it seems like it would be actually kind of hard to rug pull. But what do you tell people when they say that they're worried about something like that? Like they'll start to count on Threads Federation, and then one day perhaps it would no longer be applicable.
Yeah, I think we've definitely heard fair share of skepticism around Meta being in this space. I think there's frankly like a lot of skepticism for almost anything that a big tech company does these days.
That's true. And in some cases with the Fediverse, any company.
Right. Exactly. And that's really influenced how we've been thinking about our go-to-market for this overall. To your point, we've been trying to get out of the building and understand a lot of these concerns up front and be able to plan and design for a lot of these, getting feedback on our approaches, like really all the way down to pixel level designs with other companies and with policy stakeholders and others as well. I think there's, part of this is going to be, we hope to be able to continue to build trust and confidence with people by showing our actions and continuing to release these milestones and more features and functionality, and trying to approach this as good citizens.
Yeah, I'd say also just kind of hearing from Adam Mosseri himself. And I think he's always been into like supporting creators and giving creators the right tools. And also he's kind of a creator himself, and he understands the value in owning your audience.
I might also just add one more thought on that, us pulling the rug on something that there's still a very high cost to that. And as Peter was talking about before, we have a lot of these other open source efforts and ways that we work with developer technical communities generally, and doing one thing that is detrimental to the rest of the story that we're trying to build for how we work with those folks. That's something that we would be taking very seriously. So it's not quite as easy as just pulling out either.
Honestly, I'll add on to your add-on, which is because, we're a larger tech company, you could say, we have to think through every single thing before we do something like this. In some ways, it's almost a miracle we made it to this milestone, and we're like moving forward to more milestones. So I think in some ways, like, sure, it took longer than maybe a smaller company can move. But on the flip side, that means we've kind of gone to every single stakeholder and gotten approval and gone alignment and then gone to market. So something I would kind of say in terms of like, that's maybe the downside or the upside of moving slow is that like we're committed now and we uphold our commitments.
It's not like you guys are some rogue group in Meta and then Mark's going to be like, what the heck? What are you guys doing here? Stop doing that.
They're well aware of what we're doing.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, it was certainly meaningful that he posted from his own account that, federation was starting to happen. So, I mean, do you see the concept of federation more broadly as it relates to Meta in the future, as it relates to, Instagram and other social products you guys have? Is this the kind of thing that you would potentially look at for looking at more ways to create interoperability with those offerings?
Yeah, I think we're still very early stage on figuring this out for Threads. And there's a reason why we started it with Threads too. Like, one is it's just an earlier stage app. So frankly, introducing something like this is a lot easier when we're still building the plane, so to speak.
Yeah.
But also, we've just got a lot to learn about what does this mean? What does this look like? How are people reacting and responding to this overall? So I think that's going to be our focus for probably a good long while.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'd also say, like, one of the reasons why we added you or allowed you to have a different privacy setting on Threads is that we knew it was going to be more of a public conversation type experience. So I'm private on Instagram, but public on Threads. And that's like a really nice value add that, like, I can kind of have my public discourse area. And then for photos and stories and, like my profile grid, I share that to just kind of my private followers. And so I think the Fediverse makes more sense for like a public open discourse app of like the suite of the family app.
Yeah. And of course, another thing that people are concerned about is moderation, safety. There's really, we saw this same set of concerns when Ryan was talking about bridging Blue Sky and the Fediverse or Mastodon and ActivityPub. So, whenever we have these different technology platforms that tend to have a different type of community on it. And now you have communities coming together and intersecting. So there's always going to be some amount of disruption there or concern. One of the things I think I hear as a common theme is this concern that somebody's post that they make on Mastodon could end up in Threads, and then there could be some toxic, activity around their post on Threads, or vice versa, that there could be somebody from Threads that could, introduce toxicity into, the Mastodon realm. Of course, Mastodon has plenty of, toxic players as well. So there's a huge amount of work that's been done around moderation and safety inside of Mastodon, and more to do still. Obviously, there's a lot more to do. What are some of your guys' thoughts as it relates to those kinds of concerns?
Yeah, so I think to start, it's kind of like the blessing and curse of Fediverse is you're going to have different rule books for each of the different servers or apps that are getting built on the protocol overall. I think one of the things that we've talked about as part of our trust and safety conversations is, a lot of the instruments that we have for people to feel safe and to feel like they're able to personalize their experience are pretty blunt today. So, you can block users, you can do user blocking, like you can do server level blocking overall, which is a really big action.
Right.
You're kind of missing some other tools in there that are a little bit more like proportional response. Even things like user to server blocking. If you're seeing like, hey, I'm getting a bunch of replies from people who, maybe operate or behave or saying things that are more offensive to me or that I just don't want to opt into, like people should be able to have those levels of controls, we think. And that would be great for us to develop as more of a standard at the protocol level that is able to support over time. I think, the other part of this is, one of the downsides of where we are in our milestones overall is you post something on Threads, it ends up in Fediverse. How do you actually figure out where that content went, and how can I follow the conversation that's happening around that post that is existing potentially on multiple different servers at this point? And that's, part of that user experience starts to get better the more bi-directional you can make some of this integration. So at the point where I can actually see my Fediverse content and all of the replies on it and be able to go back and forth with those replies and being able to do that all in the same spot, I think that in combination with these tools that allow you to personalize that experience a lot more will just help make that a lot easier for people and help people feel more safe and in control.
Do you see, some of the technologies and learnings and capabilities you guys have had as potentially open sourcing some of those things or contributing those, more broadly in a way that, could benefit moderation, the decentralized moderation of the Fediverse more broadly?
Yeah, it's definitely something that's, our integrity kind of experts on the team on Threads have chatted with a bunch of folks, sometimes at the data dialogue, sometimes just out in the industry about this. I think there's still a little bit to be determined on like, what is the most practical way to do it? Are you offering the model? Are you offering the tools? Are you offering the label service? But I think it's one of the nice things about us entering the Fediverse is it kind of is like spurring that conversation that like we have kind of a world-class ability to provide a safe experience. And like, are there admins out there who would like to work with us to bring that safe experience to their server?
Yeah, I don't think we have any specifics right now, but to Peter's point, definitely something that we've been in active conversation with. And even like the crawl version of that is just what are the signals that we can share back with server admins about behavior, trends, patterns, or even specific examples that we're seeing.
Yeah.
But also recognizing like this is also where we're trying to do our diligence beforehand. Not all server admins might want to hear from us. So we're trying to approach that thoughtfully too.
Yeah, I think that's incredibly exciting. One of the things that is powerful about the Fediverse is that there are thousands of instances all around the world, and those instance owners are effectively moderators, and they are making decisions locally based on what they believe to be good content versus bad content, and so giving those folks more tools, more capability, more shared ability to moderate is extremely exciting. I think it could make the Fediverse just fundamentally safer online community than anything else that's come before it.
Yeah, and also to be clear, like this is something that if we were to pursue some of this work, this isn't something that we would expect everybody to be adopting. I think this would be like it's part of the toolkit if you want it. Like the way that we've built our technology is around a set of policies, and our policies are informed by a lot of different inputs from civil rights groups, policy stakeholders, just the values of our company generally. So we certainly wouldn't want to presume that that is now the standard within the Fediverse for how to do moderation, but making those tools more available so people have that option seems like a really compelling path from our perspective.
Yeah.
And Mike, to your point, that's what's so cool about the composable moderation of, the ad protocol from Blue Sky is just kind of coming at this problem at a protocol layer and saying like, hey, like what could we offer kind of built into the system to be able to provide this safe experience? So I think that's like, one of the two ideas I think are like really exciting about the protocol that hopefully influences ActivityPub or just the wider Fediverse at some point.
I think this is going to be very exciting year ahead because the ability to collectively moderate in a decentralized way, as you say, Peter, at the protocol level, that's a breakthrough. That is really exciting, and I think giving, as you said, Rachel, some more refined moderation tools to users, and to administrators, it's going to be that's going to also help a lot. There's a lot of, I think, expectation setting as well that I think is going to be helpful. For example, you might be on an instance that is federating with threads, like, yeah, we're going to do that. Or an instance that says, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to wait and see how it goes. But you as a user, on that instance, maybe you're okay with that decision, but you also might be surprised by that decision. You might be like, wait a minute, why are you making this decision for me? I want to follow, Joe Biden on Threads. So I do feel like there's an opportunity to have like perhaps instances that are sort of labeled, these are community instances versus these are, public instances or something along those lines that help give people better sense of what they're getting, and they're not surprised then by, why? What do you mean somebody can't find me? I thought anybody can find me, right? So this is some of the stuff I think the Fediverse needs to do as we as we continue to grow up here and evolve.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's one of the advantages that ActivityPub provides, is that you can kind of just be hanging out on your server and be like, I don't want to be exposed to other servers. And effectively, Threads profiles that don't opt in or that are private are in that state. And you can have like a great private experience on Threads if you want to, or you can go public, or you can go public plus Fediverse. And I think that's one of the tricky things about the ad protocols. It's like everything's public kind of forever. And so I think that's what's another reason why like ActivityPub just made it a lot better of a match.
Well, now one other fear I've heard from folks, and I think it's a well-placed fear, is the concept of a surveillance economy emerging in the Fediverse, and concern about privacy, concern about, data being used to monetize, surveillance happening in a way that, is incredibly capitalistic and not, helpful to, people's own privacy. That has been a challenge on the web more broadly, right? And just across the board with any sort of ad type business. Obviously you guys are in the ad business. We're in the ad business at Flipboard. There's lots of ways to do ads, and there's lots of ways to do ads that respect people's privacy. But it is definitely an issue that people are very, very concerned about as they see, companies like Threads or Flipboard or anyone else we managed to convince to federate. We got to get LinkedIn in here. That's going to be a concern. So what are your guys' thoughts on that front?
Yeah. So, in terms of monetization, like we've been saying, we're still in the very early stages of just making sure that people are having a really great experience on Threads. So that's really where our time and energy has been focused overall. I think in terms of our approach and how we would be thinking about that, like as we have been with other things related to Fediverse, we want to understand like what are some of the major considerations, what are some of the concerns. We want to be able to hear that from our users. We want to be able to hear it from the Fediverse community, from policy stakeholders. I think an important part of this is going to be transparency as well. So how do we just make sure people actually understand what's happening in terms of data practices generally? But I think there's, it's not just transparency, it's also what are the controls that people have. And I think that's something that will need to be evolving over time.
Yeah, I was going to add that, one of the things that came up in Fediforum actually was around monetization. And there was an interesting point that during kind of the desktop wars, monetization ended up being an important factor, just it being a survivable and sustainable business.
Yeah.
And not so much for us, but I just think in general, if you think about the Fediverse, I think there's a place where eventually the Fediverse is this great experience. Different apps and different servers monetize in different ways. Some do via donation today, but maybe somebody actually makes an experience that's like good enough that people pay for. I actually think there's some clients that are paid already. And so I think this is something almost like the community needs to get on board with, which is like, these servers aren't free to run, and eventually somebody needs to find a way to kind of like sustain the costs of the business. And I think there'll be a bunch of different answers to that. But I think it'll be interesting. Like again, an interesting year for the community.
Yeah. This is very much something that's going to require more discussion and thinking as we evolve, because obviously you do need to. Different types of people in the Fediverse will need to be able to subsidize the work that they're doing, whether they're a content creator, whether they're an instance owner, whether they're an application provider. And I don't think there will just be one business model. Another group that I want to really try to go and evangelize Federation to is Patreon. How cool would it be if Patreon supported ActivityPub? That would be amazing, right? So,
and I think they have a mixture of like public posts on Patreon and, Patreon only, subscriber only content. So it would be another way to like reach a bigger audience and then be like, hey, if you want more content, like I have kind of a paid version of this content too, or other content. So it does match.
Absolutely. In fact, Evan Prodromo, after Fediforum, after that monetization conversation you mentioned, Peter, Evan created a private Mastodon account that you can follow, and he'll give you access to if you give him $5 on PayPal. So
there you go.
kind of prove the concept that you can do this in the Fediverse, right? You can have a whole other account that you can follow. That's a paid access account, right? So, I do think that there's tremendous opportunity here in the ability for people to pay creators directly. One of the original sins of the internet, I think, is that the relationship between a person and a website was not done at the protocol level. I see the Fediverse with this ability to have a direct relationship with people as a core answer to then treating people with respect. If they volunteer information to you, fantastic. Just like if somebody walked into my store, my retail store on Main Street, and there's an exchange of information. It's a genuine, respectful exchange. Somebody then buys something and leaves, and you have a relationship with them. You can email with them. That is really what we're talking about here. It's a much more genuine and respectful way to monetize than what is even possible today on the web.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I think just what you said around the explicitness of like, I'm following this person. And you could imagine an extensions to the protocol eventually of saying like, I want to support micro payments, or I want to support like, hey, like feel free to show me ads if that supports you. Kind of like a way for you to like self-label and self-opt-in would be great. And I think there already are some FEPs out to actually like discuss this type of stuff. I think they're still early stages, but it's cool that people are even bringing it to the protocol already.
I think that the thing that is really exciting here is that a huge company like Meta has decided to adopt and embrace this concept of the open social web. And, it does, I'm excited that it is so foundational for you, and that you have a team that is genuinely trying to engage and do the right thing here. That's the thing about technology, technologists and the tech industry overall. You do have these very big tech companies, and there are sort of challenges with that. But in the companies are people who are actually trying to do the right thing. And that's one of the things I'm really excited to see about what you guys have been doing at Threads.
Yeah, and I think not only did we have like a really big team internally and a bunch of people to lean on at the company, but I do want to give a shout out to everybody who worked with in the community, actually. So like we definitely didn't do this alone. We've gotten a bunch of developer support, technical support, protocol support from a bunch of other Fediverse developers out there. And even like on our launch day, we had some kind of transport layer bug, and we got people to help debug it on their side live over Discord. And so like it was really cool to see how cooperative the community has been. And it's, again, an example of like, even us, we can't do it alone. So it's just been awesome to see.
Yeah.
That's the best part about working on, open source projects, Fediverse, is everybody's doing it mostly, or it seems like everybody's doing it because they love it and they believe in it. So it just makes for really good community building, really across companies, across different teams. It's been really fun.
Yeah, I know. It's kind of like we're all part of the same product team. It's like we're on Team Fediverse,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that.
Dotted line reporting.
Exactly. Yeah, it has felt like that to me. We started working with folks in the Fediverse about a year ago, and that is one of the things that's been most striking to me is that it feels like it's a broader team that I'm a part of, and it's exciting too because a lot of ways I remember back in the early days of the web, you just didn't know where it was going to go. A lot of people were very skeptical that it would ever go anywhere. America Online, AOL, was the main way people got on the internet, right? But I remember as it was developing, it was like, well, how is this going to work? How is monetization going to happen? How is this, how is it going to be a secure transaction? All of these questions. And we kind of, did a pretty good job figuring our way through those things. There are things now with hindsight, I think we could have done better. In particular, the relationship between a person and a publisher or a website. But I think that is the thing that's so exciting now is that we're kind of all figuring this out together.
Yeah, totally. And I think seeing the excitement from the web development and web protocols and standards, and seeing that kind of moment mirror now to the Fediverse, like you said, is I think there's just like something about developers get excited when we're all working towards the same goal and the same product experience and the same protocol. And seeing that success story on the web, I really hope that's kind of the path Fediverse is on now.
Yeah.
Let's check in a year from now and see how we're doing.
Yeah. Well, we'll put that on the calendar. Yeah. Rachel, Peter, it has just been fantastic to get a chance to talk to you. Thank you for the work that you guys have been doing. I'm really excited. I think you're making a huge set of, you've already made a huge set of contributions to the concept of the social web and the Fediverse. And I know there's more to come. And so again, thank you. Thank you for being on .social, and looking forward to continuing to work with you guys in the Fediverse.
Yeah.
Totally. Thank you.
Thank you. And for your gift of the podcast to the world. Big gift.
Yes, totally. Long time listener, first time caller.
Well, thanks so much for listening. You can find Rachel at rklambo@threads.net and Peter at pcottle@threads.net. You can follow Mike McHugh on Mastodon at mike@flipboard.social and on Threads at mmchugh@threads.net. Big thank you to our editors, Rosanna Caban and Anne Lay. To learn more about what Flipboard's doing in the Fediverse, sign up via the link in this show's notes. Until next time, we'll see you in the Fediverse.